And we're now joined by Jonathan. We're now joined by Jonathan Williams from the American Legislative Exchange Council. You can find him at Tax Economist on whatever you want to call Twitter these days. Twix. And Jonathan, appreciate you being on the program. Your expertise is in the numbers and the policies and the politics on this, but I thought it was fascinating that some of the candidates were working so hard to personalize the message. How do you think they did when it comes to selling conservative principles on economics and fighting back against Bidenomics?
Well, it's greetings from the land of make-believe, as always. Thanks for having me back here, coming from Washington, D.C. here. It was interesting debate, right? I mean, as a policy guy, we're going to be following all the Republican and Democrat debates this cycle. So we're in for a long haul here. We're going to be having a lot of these conversations, I think. But in the opening round, I think your question is a good one in that, certainly Tim Scott, did a very good job of connecting the dots and, why policies matter for the individual, right? And that's always been the challenge for conservatives is, we can talk numbers, we can talk facts, but, facts tell and stories sell, right? And that is something that Senator Scott, I thought, did incredibly well. I mean, I think as a policy guy here, gentlemen, I was somewhat dissatisfied, as you were alluding to in the conversation, right? I mean, I think part of it is certainly the format and the short order questions, especially the lightning round and then all the different rounds of rebuttals and certainly the big crowd interaction and some of the boos. So I would have loved to see people go a little bit deeper. I mean, we'll see how they go in the future debates, and maybe a couple of the individuals won't be there on stage. Maybe we'll have a couple of individuals that will be on stage that weren't there last night. But, I think that there were some big things missing from the discussion, such as our national debt, such as the debt downgrade, such as, Mike Pence mentioned it a little bit. But what are we going to do to get this economy going again? We can complain about Bidenomics, and there's lots of good complaints there. But what's the positive conservative vision for the future of America, and how do we get GDP and how do we get the economy going again?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, especially about the debt and the debt downgrade. Jonathan, as a follow-up, I want you to respond, if you don't mind, to one of the comments we've got on our Rumble page right now with everybody who's watching this on Rumble, in addition to being over the air and everywhere else. And we had Lisa, who says, "It was clear to me that none of the candidates are in sync with the American voting public. The entire debate was packed with conservative talking points and no active solutions." I have no idea if Lisa is a conservative or liberal or anything else, but her argument was a lot of talking points, not a lot of concrete solutions. What's your assessment of that?
Well, let me partially agree and partially disagree. I think the listener there has probably part of this right in that there was really a lack of substantive solutions in some cases. And that is back to my point about, I think this is just the quick 30-second soundbite time frame and the deadlines. The candidates all night were blowing through Brett Baer and Martha's deadlines, right? And you heard the bell multiple times and continued the bell going off. And at one point, Nikki Haley said, "You got to get this debate under control, moderators." And so part of it is the format. I do want to, hopefully we'll see better substantive solutions and less talking points. I mean, this is, the inherent battle between the policy folks on these, working with these candidates, and the political folks and the spin masters, right, that are telling them, you got to get in your one-liner. Here are the things you must do on messaging. But I will disagree in one sense with the listener there in that I do think many of these candidates, it's an impressive list of bios, it's an impressive list of experiences, just some incredibly talented individuals on stage, and they were in tune with the American public on, I think, pointing out what was wrong with what's going on right now as a country, right? Whether it's the cultural problems that we face, that several of them focused on, whether it's the massive economic challenges that we face through Bidenomics and other things. So I think they put their finger on the pulse of what is wrong in many cases, and what are the big problems are out there that we're all facing as a country, as Americans. But I do think that in the future debates, they need to hit more on the solutions, substantive conservative policy solutions that will bring us out of this problem.
Good morning, Jonathan. Gabe Pfeiffer here. So, what do you think about the effect I think that Vivek Ramaswamy had on all of the candidates in bringing up the idea of eliminating the Department of Education? I think he was the first one to come out to specifically say that was a department he would get rid of. And then I heard at least 2 or 3 other candidates say basically the same thing. And I don't think they would have said that unless, he brought it up. What do you think about the idea of that, aggressive reduction of the administrative state?
Yeah, well, it sounds as a great question, Gabe. And, while it sounds that this is an extreme position, I actually think that when explained to everyday Americans around this country, when you hear that not a single child is directly educated by the federal government through the Department of Education, that's a huge issue that we're spending billions and billions of dollars, and we expanded under Democrat and Republican administrations in the past to grow the federal involvement that was started only recently by Jimmy Carter in the 1970s. We forget it was a recent addition to our cabinet agencies. We also forget that Ronald Reagan called for the elimination of the Department of Education as part of the official Republican Party platform in the 1980s. We kind of got away from that for a couple of decades, and I think there was a bit of period and equal party criticism here. Republicans and Democrats alike sought to try to fix education problems by expanding federal involvement and giving more funding to the Department of Education. I think that was a huge policy mistake. So I think Vivek, former Vice President Pence has said this many times in the past, and many others now jumping in. I think that's exactly a kind of debate that we need to have, not just around how do we produce better educational outcomes for our kids and get more bureaucracy out of the way and let families be in charge, but also, how do we also get the federal government downsized, right? We talk a lot about the need for federalism, but what are the tangible policy solutions to enhance federalism and to enhance fiscal responsibility? This one checks all the boxes, gentlemen. I think it's a beautiful thing to be talking about.
Hey, good morning, Jonathan. Stel Ponticus here. A couple of quick items. That 30-second bell during the debate kept reminding me that I wish I was in a restaurant. Where's my BLT?
Yeah.
It sounded like the chef ringing the bell.
Pepsi, no Coke.
Yeah, that would do it. And on another note, you mentioned that we might see someone else in debate number 2. And I got to say, during the entire night, I was thinking, boy, I wish Larry Elder was here. Do you think there's a chance he could get in next time?
Hey, it's possible, right? I mean, not a lot of people gave Governor Hutchinson or Governor Burgum a shot to make this debate. And so I think that it's very possible we see somebody like that. I mean, I think there's a lot of chatter around Washington, D.C. as well, that perhaps if Governor Youngkin has a good fall here in Virginia and potentially takes back the legislature, there's a strong argument that depending on how the political winds are blowing at the time, we may see Governor Glenn Youngkin, for instance, jump in late in the game as well. So I think there's some dark horses out there in addition to some of those candidates that maybe didn't meet the threshold this time that have a chance in the future.
We're visiting with Jonathan Williams, American Legislative Exchange Council. We've already tagged you on our social media, so I hope people follow you on there and connect with you. All right, Jonathan, now from a debate perspective, we're talking about the next one, which is going to be next month at the Ronald Reagan Library. If you are advising these candidates and saying you want to sell conservative principles, you want to sell our conservative economic policies, conservative trade policies, whatever it is, what did we learn, or what should we have learned from last night's debate that they should be applying to how they message in the future, not just in the debates, but in their campaigns overall? I mean, what do voters need to hear from them?
Well, I think they, back to our original contention here from last night, was less of the well-honed talking points, perhaps, and more of the substance, right? And we don't want to just focus on the problems. I think the vast majority of Americans are very aware. That's why you see President Biden's approval ratings in the tank right now. In fact, the most popular, or I should say the least popular governor in America, I think, is the governor of Oregon right now, liberal Democrat. And even she is more popular than President Biden right now. That tells you something, right? In that Americans identify what the problems are that we're facing, and that the Biden administration hasn't done a whole lot to help them. In fact, it's precipitated them in many cases. And so I think to turn away from just the rhetorical flourishes that we see, that the campaign spin masters are going to be advising them, I think they need to see, what is my position? What are my platforms? What are my solutions? Tangible solutions that will turn this ship around, and what are those positive conservative ways to do so? Not just by demonizing Bidenomics or the Biden administration. There's lots of room to do that, but what would you do if I was president of the United States? If any of these candidates were president of the United States, what's your plan to turn America around in tangible ways that people understand, and a positive vision, and connecting it to real people? So that would be my advice. Not that any of these folks are hiring me, but take it for what it's worth.
All right, Jonathan, I got a minute or so left here. What's hot at the American Legislative Exchange Council right now? Then we'll give out the website and social media information.
Well, I'll tell you what, we just came out of an amazing ALEC annual meeting down in Orlando, Florida. Governor DeSantis was there and spoke to us as the home state governor, but we had incoming speaker Danny Perez host the meeting, and from our board of directors, our national chairman, over 1,600 of our conservative friends were with us developing new model policies in the areas, big policy priorities for us right now that I would have loved to see more discussion about last night. ESG and the war on American energy independence, education freedom. A few of the candidates touched on that, but not enough in terms of how do we empower parents. And then, looking at the economy, how do we get more economic opportunity and ways to cut taxes? Because all these Trump tax cuts go away automatically, as you guys know, at the end of 2025 for individuals. That is a huge problem facing us going forward, and not nearly enough discussions being played to that. That's what's going on at ALEC. The 3 E's: energy independence, economic opportunity, and looking at ways to continue to keep us strong through education freedom.
All right, Jonathan Williams, American Legislative Exchange Council. We've tagged you on social media already. Appreciate you giving us the insight, and I'll probably bug you sooner rather than later to have you back on.
We're going to have a lot of these discussions for the debate series, gentlemen. Great to be with you.
All right, thanks a lot.